5 women knelt in the dust before Ezekiel Thornfield's failing ranch, their traveling dresses torn and faces streaked with desperation. His shotgun trembled in weathered hands. 3 years of solitude had made him wild around the edges. The wind carried their scent of fear and exhaustion across the barren yard. His cattle bones bleached white near the dried creek bed. The women had nowhere left to run. Seraphina Caldwell raised her head first. Boston refinement couldn't hide the terror in her green eyes. Her voice cracked like autumn leaves. "Please, Mr. Thornfield, we have nowhere else to go." One by one, the others followed her lead. Ruby Mae Jenkins, all sharp angles and calloused hands. Elena Vasquez, dark hair escaping its pins. Constance O'Brien, her Irish accent thick with unshed tears. Temperance Washington, dignity intact despite kneeling. In foreign soil, the postal mix-up had delivered them to death's doorstep. Their intended husbands existed only in forged letters and false promises. Zeke's finger found the trigger. Margaret's voice echoed in his memory, soft and forgiving. She would have welcomed these women without question. But Margaret was 3 years buried with their son beneath the cottonwood tree. Elena spoke barely above a whisper. Her words cut through the mountain air like winter wind. "If you send us back to town, we're all dead women." The truth settled heavy between them. 5. Lev's balanced on his decision. The approaching winter would claim them if their pursuers didn't first. Zeke lowered the shotgun. His voice came out rusted from disuse. "You can stay until the supply wagon comes." 2 weeks. The women's shoulders sagged with relief. They had bought themselves time, nothing more. The ranch house barely contained one man's grief. 5 women made it overflow with awkward necessity. They took the loft while Zeke retreated to the barn. The smell of hay and leather became his new companions. Night brought confessions and measured doses. Seraphina claimed flight from unwanted marriage. Ruby Mae sought escape from her past. Elena mourned a recently lost husband. Connie chased American dreams. Temperance planned to educate frontier children. Half-truths wrapped in careful words. Each woman guarded secrets that could destroy them all. Dawn revealed their value beyond desperation. Seraphina spread Zeke's financial papers across the kitchen table. Her educated eyes caught discrepancies he had missed for years. "Your grain supplier has been overcharging you 30%. Elena walked among his dying cattle with practiced assessment. Her hands moved with veterinary knowledge learned. From necessity, blackleg disease, treatable if caught early. Ruby Mae faced down Silas Garrett when he came demanding overdue payments. Her stance spoke of violence survived and strength earned through suffering. Mr. Thornfield will pay when the cattle recover, not before. Connie disappeared behind the broken windmill. Metal sang against metal under her patient hands. By evening, water flowed again for the first time in months. Temperance rode to the Crow encampment beyond the ridge. She returned with promises of fair trade and winter grain. Her diplomatic skills opened doors Zeke never knew existed. The first week transformed desperation into partnership. The women moved with purpose through tasks that had overwhelmed him alone. The ranch breathed again under their collective care. But the outside world noticed. Their first trip to town for supplies brought scandalized whispers and pointed stares. Preacher Matthias Crowley blocked their path outside the general store. "This arrangement is an affront to Christian decency, Thornfield." Banker Cornelius Pike emerged from his office like a spider sensing prey. His smile carried threats wrapped in civility. "Ezekiel, I'm concerned about your living situation. It reflects poorly on your character. Perhaps we should discuss your loan terms." The women stood silent behind Zeke. They had faced this judgment before in different forms. Society demanded conformity, even from the desperate. Zeke felt their eyes on his back. His decision would determine their fate. Send them away to satisfy social conventions or fight for this unexpected lifeline. The ranch had shown more life in 1 week than in 3 years of his solitary struggle. Serafin's financial acumen had already saved him hundreds of dollars. Elena's medical knowledge was healing his herd. Ruby May's fierce protection kept creditors at bay. Connie's mechanical skills restored broken systems. Temperance's diplomacy opened new markets. They had done more for his failing ranch than he had managed alone since Margaret's death. His voice carried across the dusty street with newfound conviction. These women have proven their worth 10 times over. Anyone who doesn't like my arrangement can take their business elsewhere. Pike's smile turned predatory. The preacher's face flushed with righteous anger. But Zeke had made his choice. The women were no longer temporary guests. They were partners in survival. The ride home passed in charged silence. Something fundamental had shifted. The women sat straighter in the wagon bed. Their borrowed time had become earned sanctuary. That evening, they gathered around the kitchen table like a family. Serafin's ledgers showed the ranch's first profitable projections in years. Elena reported the cattle responding to treatment. Ruby May had negotiated extended payment terms with 3 creditors. Connie's irrigation plans promised increased crop yields. Temperance had secured winter supplies at favorable rates. 5 women who had knelt in desperate supplication now sat as equals around his table. Their individual skills wove together into something stronger than survival. They were building something new from the broken pieces of their separate lives. Zeke watched their faces in the lamplight. Each carried wounds that would never fully heal. But together, they were creating hope from shared determination. The 2-week deadline approached unmentioned. No one spoke of supply wagons or temporary arrangements. They had found something worth fighting for in this unlikely alliance. Outside, winter crept closer through the mountain passes. But inside the small ranch house, warmth grew from more than the crackling fire. It grew from the possibility that broken people could create something whole when they stopped running from each other and started running toward hope. Winter settled over the ranch with quiet determination. The 2-week deadline passed unspoken. Supply wagons came and went without discussion of departure. The women had stopped being guests and become something more permanent. Zeke found himself watching them work with growing appreciation. Serafina reorganized his chaotic record, keeping with methodical precision. Her educated hands transformed years of neglect into organized efficiency. She caught systematic overcharges in supplier contracts that had bled his accounts dry. Elena moved among the cattle with inherited wisdom. Her father had been a veterinarian before the war took everything. She mixed treatments from memory and intuition. The herd responded to her care with visible improvement. Ruby May handled creditors with strategic intimidation. Her past had taught her to read dangerous men and know exactly how far to push. Threats became negotiations under her steady gaze. Connie built improvements with patient engineering. Her hands understood metal and wood in ways that spoke of necessity learned young. The ranch's broken systems came alive under her touch. Temperance expanded their world beyond the property lines. She spoke 3 languages and understood the delicate balance of frontier diplomacy. Trade agreements followed her visits to neighboring settlements. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. But prosperity brought attention neither Zeke nor the women wanted. Evenings became charged with unspoken tensions. Zeke found himself drawn to each woman for different reasons. Serafin's intellect challenged his mind. Elena's passion stirred something long dormant. Ruby May's fierce loyalty spoke to his protective instincts. Connie's quiet competence offered comfortable partnership. Temperance's moral clarity reminded him of forgotten principles. The women noticed his shifting attention. Subtle competition emerged in shared glances and small gestures. They competed for his approval while maintaining careful sisterhood. Margaret's portrait watched from the mantel. Her painted eyes held no judgment, only patient understanding. But Zeke still spoke to her in whispered conversations when the house slept. The first crack in their careful harmony came during a tense encounter in town. A stranger had been asking questions about Ruby May. His description matched someone from her carefully buried past. That night, she sat by the dying fire and spoke words that cost her dearly. "I witnessed a murder back in Kansas. The killer calls himself Black Jack Morrison. He's been tracking me west." Her admission hung heavy in the small room. The others absorbed this revelation with the quiet acceptance of people carrying their own secrets. Elena's confession came days later when Zeke found her practicing knife work behind the barn. Her movements spoke of deadly competence learned through necessity. "I killed my husband. He was beating me to death, and I fought back." Mexican authorities called it murder. The pattern became clear. Each woman carried dangerous baggage. Their arrival at his ranch had not been coincidence, but misdirection. Connie discovered the truth while repairing his old desk. Hidden correspondence revealed postal clerk Vernon Wickham's deliberate manipulation. He had taken bribes to misdirect all 5 women to Zeke's remote ranch. The revelation struck them like winter lightning. They had not been abandoned by bureaucratic error. They had been deliberately sent to die in the wilderness. Zeke's ranch had been chosen because everyone assumed he would immediately turn away desperate women. The isolation that had protected his grief was meant to ensure their deaths. The discovery bonded them deeper than shared work or growing affection. They were united by betrayal and the miracle of survival. Each woman had been marked for death by different enemies, but Wickham's corruption had saved them all by accident. But the net was closing. Other strangers appeared in town asking careful questions. Well-dressed men claimed to represent Seraphine's family. A Mexican bounty hunter inquired about recent arrivals. Irish accents were heard in the saloon asking about Constance O'Brien. The women's pasts were converging on their present sanctuary. The crisis came when Seraphine's pursuers made their offer directly. They approached Zeke outside the bank with leather satchels full of money, enough to pay off his loans and secure the ranch permanently. "Miss Caldwell's father is worried sick. We're prepared to compensate you generously for your trouble." The women watched from the general store porch. They had faced this moment in different forms throughout their lives, men with money and power demanding their surrender. The question was whether Zeke would prove different. His answer came without hesitation. "Miss Caldwell is under my protection. You gentlemen need to leave my property." The enforcers retreated with promises of legal action. Their polite threats carried the weight of institutional power. But Zeke had chosen his side in a conflict that would only escalate. That evening, gratitude overwhelmed Seraphine's careful restraint. She kissed him with desperate relief and growing affection. Her lips tasted of tears and hope. Elena witnessed the kiss from the kitchen doorway. Her own feelings, carefully hidden until now, blazed to life with jealous clarity. The romantic tension that had simmered beneath their partnership exploded into open competition, but their rivalry remained respectful. These women had learned to survive together. They would not let romantic complications destroy their found family. Zeke found himself torn between growing feelings and impossible choices. He cared for all of them in different ways. The heart that had been closed since Margaret's death now threatened to burst with conflicting emotions. The threats multiplied. With each passing day, Black Jack Morrison's name was heard in saloons 2 towns over. Mexican officials inquired about fugitives. Irish gang representatives made subtle appearances. Territorial marshals began asking questions about suspicious activities. The ranch became an armed camp. Someone always watched the approaches. The women took turns with rifles they handled with troubling competence. Their past had taught them skills no woman should need. Zeke transformed from isolated hermit to fierce protector. The man who had hidden from life now stood ready to fight for the family he had accidentally acquired. His feelings for the women crystallized into something deeper than romance. They were his chosen family, and he would defend family with his life. But the enemy was larger than individual pursuers. The corruption that had brought them together ran deeper than a single postal clerk's greed. Forces were moving against them with systematic patience. The ranch prospered even as danger circled closer. Their combined skills had created something remarkable from broken pieces. The cattle thrived. The land produced. The book showed profit for the first time in years. They had built hope from shared determination. But hope was fragile in a world that demanded conformity and punished the unconventional. The women began making quiet preparations. Emergency supplies hidden in the barn. Escape routes planned through the mountain passes. Letters written but not sent to contacts in distant territories. They would not surrender their sanctuary without a fight, but they also would not let their battles destroy the man who had given them safe harbor. The winter wind carried whispers of approaching storm. Not weather, but human tempest born of greed and vengeance. The peace they had built together was about to be tested by forces beyond their control. Zeke stood on the porch watching the distant mountains. Margaret's voice no longer dominated his thoughts. 5 living women had replaced one cherished ghost. Their laughter filled the house that had known only silence. He would not lose this family to the same cruel forces that had taken his first. The isolated rancher who had knelt before grief now stood ready to face whatever came for the women who had saved his ranch and his soul. The battle for their unconventional family was about to begin. The hunters arrived with the first hard frost. Black Jack Morrison's distinctive laugh echoed from the saloon 3 miles down the valley. Mexican leather creaked outside the general store. Irish voices carried threats in familiar accents. Seraphon's pursuers had returned with official papers bearing territorial seals. The ranch became a fortress of watchful eyes and loaded rifles. Someone always stood guard while others worked. Sleep came. In shifts, conversations died when hoofbeats approached on the wind. Ruby May cleaned her pistol with mechanical precision. Her hands remembered the weight of weapons from harder times. The woman who had once served drinks now served notice that she would not be taken easily. Elena sharpened kitchen knives with deadly intent. Her movements spoke of violence learned. In desperate moments, the gentle healer carried the skills of a killer when necessity demanded. Connie rigged early warning systems around the property perimeter. Tripwires and noisemakers would announce unwelcome visitors. Her mechanical genius turned to protective innovation. Temperance wrote letters in 3 languages to contacts across the territory. Her network of educators and civil rights advocates would carry word if the worst happened. Serafina organized their legal defenses with Boston precision. She knew the law better than frontier officials expected from a woman. Her education became their shield against corrupt authority. Zeke transformed from grieving hermit to fierce protector. The man who had hidden from life now faced it with renewed purpose. His feelings for the women had crystallized into something deeper than romance. They were his chosen family, and family was worth dying for. But the enemy proved larger than individual pursuers. Territorial marshals arrived with federal authority and suspicious timing. Their leader, Marshal Garrett Webb, carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never been refused. Webb's questions focused on Temperance with uncomfortable intensity. His interest went beyond routine investigation. Someone powerful wanted her found and silenced. That night, the truth emerged in whispered confessions around the dying fire. Temperance carried evidence that could destroy men in positions of authority. Her teaching had uncovered a slavery conspiracy that reached into territorial government itself. Banker Cornelius Pike's name appeared in documents proving illegal slave trading post-emancipation. He had used his financial position to forge papers and sell freed people back into bondage. The profits had built his empire of legitimate business. Temperance had been gathering evidence for months before fleeing east. Her contacts in the Underground Railroad had died protecting her escape. Now she carried the proof that could bring justice or get them all killed. The revelation struck the group with the force of mountain lightning. They were not just harboring fugitives. They were protecting the key witness to crimes that powerful men would kill to keep buried. Pike's ultimatum arrived with the morning sun. Pay the full loan immediately, surrender Temperance, and send the other women away. Or lose everything and face criminal charges as accomplices to harboring fugitives. The banker's smile carried the weight of institutional power. He controlled the law, the money, and the political connections that could destroy them all. Their success had made them visible to forces beyond their ability to fight. The women began packing with quiet resignation, each prepared to face her individual fate rather than drag the others into shared destruction. Their found family started fracturing under pressure too great for any single ranch to bear. Serafina folded her legal papers with mechanical precision. She would return to Boston and face whatever consequences awaited. Her education would not save her from men who owned judges and politicians. Ruby May cleaned her weapons one final time. Black Jack Morrison would find her easier to kill than to capture. She had made that decision years ago when survival became more important than hope. Elena gathered her medical supplies into a traveling bag. The Mexican bounty hunter would take her back to face charges she could not fight. Her knife skills would not overcome an entire legal system. Connie dismantled her mechanical improvements with careful hands. The Irish gangs would collect their debts in whatever currency they demanded. Her engineering genius could not build a fortress strong enough to stop them. Temperance burned her evidence in the kitchen stove. The slavery conspiracy would continue, unpunished. Her sacrifice would save the others from charges of harboring a fugitive. Zeke watched his family dissolve with the same helpless rage he had felt when fever took Margaret and their son. External forces were destroying the people he loved while he stood powerless to stop them. But rage crystallized into determination. As he stared at Margaret's portrait, her painted eyes held understanding and forgiveness. She had loved him completely and expected the same courage from him. These 5 women had brought him back to life. He would not let them face death alone. The man who had hidden from grief now chose to face impossible odds. His voice cut through their quiet preparations with fierce conviction. I lost my family once to forces I couldn't control. I won't lose my family again. You are my family, all of you. The women stopped packing. Their individual resignations wavered in the face of his absolute commitment. They had learned to survive alone, but they had thrived together. Zeke's plan formed with desperate clarity. They would not run from their pursuers or surrender to corruption. They would fight using the same weapons their enemies employed: evidence, law, community pressure, and moral authority. Each woman's unique skills would become part of a coordinated defense. Seraphine's legal knowledge would expose procedural violations. Ruby May's testimony would link Morrison to territorial crimes. Elena's community connections would rally support from exploited populations. Connie's mechanical genius would create nonviolent deterrence. Temperance's evidence would destroy Pike's criminal empire. The ranch house became a war room where desperate people planned their impossible victory. Maps spread across the kitchen table. Letters went out to contacts across the territory. Legal documents were copied and hidden in multiple locations. They would make their stand together or fall together. The isolation that had once protected Zeke's grief now became their fortress against a corrupt world. Outside, winter deepened. With the promise of harder times ahead, the pursuing forces gathered strength and legal authority. Money and power aligned against their small rebellion. But inside the ranch house, broken people refused to stay broken. They had found something worth fighting for in their unconventional family. Love had taken root in unlikely soil and grown strong enough to resist the storm. The battle for their future would test every skill they possessed and every bond they had forged. Victory seemed impossible against such overwhelming odds. But impossibility had brought them together in the first place. 5 desperate women had knelt in the dust and begged for sanctuary. One isolated man had chosen compassion over safety. Together, they had built something remarkable from the fragments of their shattered lives. Now they would discover if love could triumph over the forces that had driven them to this remote corner of the frontier. The final confrontation was coming, and they would face it as family. The final confrontation came with the morning sun. Pike arrived with corrupt marshals, and all the women's pursuers assembled behind him. Black Jack Morrison rode beside Mexican bounty hunters and Irish debt collectors. Their confidence spoke of certain victory against isolated fugitives. But they found something unexpected waiting at the ranch. The entire community had gathered in support. Dr. Catherine Mills stood with her medical bag in fierce determination. Sheriff Jake Morrison had chosen justice over his distant criminal namesake. Townspeople the women had helped over the winter months formed a protective circle around the ranch house. Seraphine's legal documents spread across makeshift tables in the yard. Her evidence of Pike's systematic fraud caught territorial officials in documented lies. Financial records proved years of exploitation that could not be dismissed or buried. Ruby May's testimony linked Black Jack Morrison to murders across 3 territories. Her detailed knowledge of his crimes provided law enforcement with evidence they had been seeking for years. The hunter became the hunted under legal scrutiny. Elena's connections with Mexican and Native American communities revealed Pike's broader pattern of exploitation. Witnesses came forward with stories of stolen land and broken contracts. His empire rested on systematic theft from vulnerable populations. Connie's mechanical innovations demonstrated the women's positive contributions to the community. Her windmill designs had improved water access for dozens of ranches. Her engineering skills proved their value to territorial development. Temperance's evidence destroyed Pike's carefully constructed facade. Documents detailed the slavery conspiracy with names, dates, and financial records. Federal authorities could not ignore proof of ongoing human trafficking. The confrontation became a trial in the court of public opinion. The community faced a choice between Pike's traditional power and the unconventional family that had proven their worth through actions rather than birth or wealth. Dr. Mills stepped forward with quiet authority. Her voice carried the weight of professional reputation and moral clarity. These women have shown more Christian charity and practical skill than most men in this territory. I will not stand by while corruption destroys what decency has built. Sheriff Morrison arrested Black Jack Morrison for territorial crimes that predated his pursuit of Ruby May. The killer's reign of terror ended in iron shackles and legal justice. The Mexican bounty hunter retreated when faced with territorial authority backing Elena's right to due process. His extradition papers proved worthless against federal protection. Irish debt collectors found their claims invalidated by evidence of illegal contracts and predatory lending practices. Connie's debts dissolved under legal scrutiny that revealed systematic fraud. Pike's empire crumbled under the weight of accumulated evidence. Federal marshals replaced corrupt territorial officials. Justice moved with the slow certainty of institutional authority finally applied correctly. The women watched their enemies face consequences with quiet satisfaction. Victory tasted sweeter for being earned through evidence rather than violence. They had fought with weapons of truth and community support. But victory brought new challenges. The romantic tensions that had simmered through their shared struggles now demanded resolution. 5 women and 1 man faced feelings that transcended conventional arrangements. Zeke found his heart pulled in multiple directions, by women who had each saved him in different ways. But clarity came through months of shared hardship and deepening understanding. Elena's love of the land matched his own passion for building something lasting. Their partnership felt natural and sustainable. She carried new life within her, the future taking root in fertile ground. Serafina discovered unexpected feelings for Dr. Mills that transcended conventional expectations. Their intellectual connection had deepened into something more profound. Love took forms that society might question, but hearts understood. Ruby May found strength in Sheriff Morrison's steady character. His law enforcement background appreciated her survival skills. They built partnership on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. Temperance chose her calling over conventional romance. Her work with civil rights and education demanded complete dedication. But she remained central to their chosen family structure. Connie embraced her role as the beloved aunt figure whose mechanical genius benefited everyone. Her innovation spread across the territory, bringing prosperity to isolated communities. The ranch became the center of an unconventional but thriving extended family. Traditional marriage existed alongside other forms of committed partnership. Love expressed itself through shared purpose rather than restrictive social conventions. 1 year later, spring brought new life to the land and the people who worked it. Elena's child played in the dirt where 5 desperate women had once knelt begging for sanctuary. The sound of laughter replaced the silence of grief. Zeke worked the fields with hands that had learned to nurture rather than merely survive. His cattle grazed on grass that grew strong from care and attention. The ranch prospered under management that valued contribution over convention. Temperance's school served children from every background and ethnicity. Education became the foundation for a more just community. Her classroom prepared the next generation for leadership based on merit rather than birth. Seraphine's business ventures employed townspeople at fair wages with honest contracts. Her financial acumen built prosperity that lifted the entire community. Success shared became success multiplied. Ruby May's partnership with the sheriff brought law enforcement that protected rather than oppressed. Justice served all citizens equally regardless of background or status. Safety became a community responsibility. Connie's innovations spread across the territory through patents and partnerships. Her mechanical genius improved life for isolated ranchers and growing towns. Progress served human needs rather than mere profit. The 5 women who had knelt in desperate supplication now stood as pillars of their community. They had transformed from refugees into leaders through determination and mutual support. Their unconventional family proved that love transcends traditional boundaries. Commitment takes many forms when built on respect, shared purpose, and genuine care for each other's welfare. The ranch house that had once echoed with grief now rang with the sounds of chosen family. Children's voices mixed with adult conversation. Plans for the future replaced memories of painful pasts. Margaret's portrait still held place of honor on the mantle, but her painted eyes now watched over a living family rather than a solitary mourner. Love had found ways to honor the past while embracing the future. The frontier had demanded conformity from desperate people seeking new lives. But courage and compassion had created something better than conventional expectations. They had built a community based on choice, respect, and love in all its forms. 5 women had knelt in the dust and begged for sanctuary. 1 man had chosen mercy over safety. Together, they had proven that family is not defined by blood or traditional marriage, but by the decision to build something beautiful from broken pieces. Their story became legend in a territory that valued independence and innovation. They had created new possibilities for frontier life through determination and mutual support. Hope had taken root in unlikely soil and grown strong enough to weather any storm. The wind still carried secrets across the mountain valleys, but now it carried stories of triumph rather than tragedy, of love that conquered fear, and of families that chose each other across all boundaries that society might impose. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.